Premier, you say that this is not so much about the numbers but more the story behind the numbers. So seeing as we don't have that yet, surely that means that Victoria's contact tracing is just not up to scratch for us to reopen.
No, it means no such thing at all. It means no such thing at all. Have a look at Kilmore, have a look at Shepparton, have a look at Benalla, have a look at Latrobe Valley. The list goes on and on. Our contact tracers are pulling this up. That's why we've got 3 cases in Shepparton. We've got, much smaller numbers in other outbreaks. They're not hundreds and hundreds of cases, which they could easily be. And I don't think it's fair to say that we don't have the narrative. We do have the narrative. What I'm saying to you is it becomes more important. We have the story behind each of these cases. And that's in some respects as important, and in some circumstances even more important than the actual numbers. 2 or 3, 5 that are contained, where one person had it, they isolated, the rest of their household isolated, but because of the wildly infectious nature of the virus, the other 4 members in the family got it. Those 5 cases are infinitely different to 5 cases, the source of which is not known to us, they're mysteries, or an outbreak where we only get the information we need late, for instance, and it's away, and it's dozens or hundreds of people that are infected. That's the point I'm making. Contact tracing has never been stronger. Can it be stronger again? Well, I don't think there's any great massive improvement that can be made, but we're looking for it every day. Every day we're looking for minutes, for hours, and we're also looking for the most accurate information to be given to us. We've had a couple of outbreaks in recent times where people haven't told us the truth. You don't get in trouble for telling the truth. It's like talking to your doctor. All we want is the coronavirus information. It's gold. It's absolute treasure. And if we get a complete picture, we can really pounce on this, and we can make sure that it only goes, perhaps as far as it's gone already. It doesn't go any further. That's the absolute key point.
Premier, how is it that your advice is just so at odds with the advice of the federal government, the federal health minister, other doctors, other epidemiologists, mental health experts who are calling on businesses to reopen now?
Well, there'll be differences of opinion from time to time, but I'll put it to you, I'll be really clear, and to Minister Hunt and anybody else who has a view about these things. I don't accept that anybody has a more complete picture of what this virus is doing in Victoria than the Victorian Chief Health Officer, the Victorian Deputy Chief Health Officer, the Victorian Health Minister, and the Victorian Premier, and a cast of many hundreds of other experts and people who are dedicated to this task. With the greatest of respect to those who have a different view, they're entitled to have a view, but they're not entitled to assert that they have a more complete picture of where we were, where we've got to, and where we plan to stay. And that is low numbers that achieved low and stay low. There can be lots of different opinions, but the group that you just listed, I think there are some political opinions in there, and I think there are some epidemiological opinions in there, and ultimately the call is for us to make, and we have to make that call. This is not a PhD thesis. It's not an academic exercise. It's real, and the stakes are high. And my position to the Victorian community is I'm not doing what's popular, I'm doing what's safe. Because we don't want to be back here again.
Premier, on the original roadmap, this next step would get rid of the 5 kilometre rule, and there would be no travel restrictions. So why have you now put in place the 25 kilometre rule?
Because that's a public health advice, and it will assist us in greater certainty about less movement than would otherwise be the case.
So are you able to explain the science and data behind 25 kilometres?
No, I've already dealt with that. I think I dealt with that off the top, where I said to you that I can't attribute to that one measure a percentage public health dividend. It's a package of measures, and you're free to try and pick apart each and every part of the rules, and there's been a bit of that going on for quite some time. That's fine. That's fine.
Impact people's lives, so it's
well, they do impact people's lives, but I tell you what I tell you what they also impact. They also impact 725 cases becoming 2. That's what they impact. And that means we've got opportunities that France doesn't have, most of the United States doesn't have, opportunities that England doesn't have. The list goes on and on. Victorians can be proud, optimistic, and more than hopeful. They can just look at the data and the stories that sit behind that data. This package of measures, with pain of course, and with consequences, has worked. I cannot attribute a percentage dividend to every single item in the package. That's the nature of how packages work. They're a package of different things, and they all contribute to delivering a strategy. And there's simply no getting around the fact that we've gone from 725 cases to 5 days in a row, the last 5 days, in single figures. And I think that's something Victorians should be proud of and optimistic about. And if we can move further next weekend, we will. If not, we will move the following weekend. And as others are going into a deadly COVID winter, we are building, every Victorian is building a COVID-safe summer and a COVID normal 2021. And I think that's a deeply impressive thing.
Encourage you to release the correspondence relating to your position on the passengers arriving from New Zealand. He thinks those emails will clearly show that you authorised, or Victoria authorised the people to come there. Will you release any correspondence?
I'm happy to release the numerous letters I've sent to the Prime Minister, and they say no such thing. It'd be just easier if Mr Tudge just accepted the fact that we were asked, do you want to be in the bubble? And we said no. And then, and I will get my notes back, Martin, because it's important. No, actually, I do have them here, thank you. You know how yesterday I said there were 17? Turned out there's 55 that have turned up from New Zealand. So this is gold standard, apparently, according to the federal government. Gold standard, a term that's been used quite a bit. We have been able to find 23 of those at 16 addresses. We are still working to find the balance. We got given a list 12 hours after they arrived. That's gold standard, apparently. We're having to find these people. We get a phone number, and we get this list of who's here, right? We're ringing them. One of them was in Byron Bay, and yet we were told they'd landed and travelled to Melbourne. Like, seriously, my advice to Minister Tudge is, instead of stubbornly defending this, work with us, and let's make sure Victoria's not part of a bubble that we never agreed to be in. Now, if that's not possible, well, then let's talk about what else can happen. I don't want to shut our border, but he should have a conversation with his boss. He should have a conversation with the Prime Minister, who I've lost count of the number of times he said to me, thank you for not closing your border. And we want to get all the borders open. I want that too. But we can't have people just wandering into the place from another country. It's New Zealand today. Who knows what the next bubble is with, who that's with. You know, we've got authorised officers at the airport now because this has happened. We didn't think it would happen, but it has happened. We're going to follow up as much as we can. But I don't control the borders, and I don't control what happens at Sydney Airport, and I don't think anyone can reasonably expect me to. So I'm not looking for a quarrel on this. I just want it fixed. And if this is the best we can do, that people may finish up coming here because no one's got the power or authority to stop them, fine. Let's all work together. Let's get the best information as quickly as possible. Let's have a perfectly respectful conversation with people once they arrive in Melbourne. That's what we're doing now. Let's make sure, masks, all these rules. How's someone from New Zealand to know what all these rules are?
But how's someone from Sydney to know? What's the difference? There's more cases in Sydney than there are in New Zealand, so what's the problem?
Yes, but Lundy, they can't go into WA because the borders are shut.
Neither can we.
No, they can't go to Queensland because the borders are shut. So the very fact that we've done what the Prime Minister wants us to do and keep our border open, then we get asked, do you want to be in the New Zealand bubble? And we say no. And now we find ourselves, we are. So we'd actually be better off if we'd done what the federal government has criticised every day and twice on Sundays for months, close our border. I don't want to do that. This is fixable, but at the end of the day, instead of just saying, righto, this is not ideal, let's all work together to fix it, we've got all these federal ministers out there saying somehow it's my fault that people... I've got a bit on at the moment, right? But apparently I should add to what I do, monitoring every single person at Sydney Airport. Like, come on. Like, we've got a bit to get on with here. International borders are not the responsibility of the state government, and what happens in Sydney is not the responsibility of the state, our state government. Let's all just all work together to get this right. But until there's an acknowledgement that something's gone wrong here, and I'm not interested in blame, let's just fix it. But emails and all this at 20 paces, that's not going to fix it. Anyway,
It's still not clear what needs to be fixed, Premier, what the harm is. I mean...
Well, no, there's
you're-
a significant
you're-
harm.
You're conflating arrivals from New Zealand with arrivals from elsewhere who need to quarantine in hotels still in Sydney.
but hang on, this is the thing. We made it clear that we don't want international arrivals, regardless of what country they come from, into our state, unless they quarantine.
Not at Melbourne Airport,
That's
no.
well, yeah, indeed. But if you're, like, do you want to be in the bubble? Answer: no. And yet, we are.
So if I'm a Melburnian...
Because we've got 55 people here. I think it's
55.
55. One of them's in Byron Bay, even though we were told they got on a plane and come to Melbourne.
That's an administrative issue, not whether...
The whole
they're
thing's an
COVID
administrative
threat to
issue. The
Melbourne.
whole thing's an
I
administrative issue.
guess the issue is, what's the difference between someone coming from Dubai doing their 2 weeks quarantine in Sydney, then getting on a Jetstar flight to Melbourne? They've met the entry requirements.
Yes.
To somebody who comes from New Zealand, meets the entry requirements, so is allowed not to quarantine, getting
Right.
on the same flight to Melbourne.
Well,
What's the difference?
Well, we would know about the Dubai person.
Why? How? If they've
I
done their
don't
2
know.
weeks
If
quarantine.
they've done 2
how?
weeks quarantine, then they've done 2 weeks
But
quarantine.
so they've met the entry requirements by doing that.
But hang
So-
on, but Lundy, what you're asking me to forget, or just to sort of, for the sake of politeness, is that if none of this matters, why were we asked, do you want to be in the bubble?
Is that because you're opening Tullamarine to international
No,
arrivals?
no, we said, well, we may finish up having to do that for the purposes of flights from New Zealand. That may be a better way to regulate this than being captive to whatever happens at an airport in another state. So that's on the table. I'd do that before I close the border. Now, this has become a quarrel because people in the federal government refuse to accept that this is not what we agreed to. I'm not interested in a quarrel. I just want it fixed. And if they're going to come, and they're safe, and we're not alleging that they aren't safe, Lundy, but frankly, if you've got... people in Victoria can't move around their own state, yet people can come from Auckland and move around without a briefing, have a freedom of movement, as it were, that actual Victorians don't have.
But that's a political problem, not a COVID problem.
Well, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. What do you think the chances of people who've come from another country and have made their way to Victoria, unbeknownst to us, right, observing all the rules that we have here? I think it's not unreasonable to say perhaps less.
So is
Than if they were-
Hume and Albury
But
been
what
given
about
instructions on our...
Well, of course they are.
What are people landing from Queensland? Are they getting an info sheet when their plane lands saying these are the rules?
Well, there's not very many of them, and we know that they're coming. This is the thing is
but
this.
it's the
The
same.
thing, no, but it's not the same. It involves aviation, so I always knew I was going to get into trouble with you, Lundy. But at the end of the day, we were asked a question: do you want to be part of this? We said no. We've found ourselves part of it without having agreed to it. Let's all just work together and make sure that what's safe, what's known and got some structure. I think that's the most important thing. We will make sure that everyone who comes here now has got all the information they need. But I would just say it does get a little challenging when we don't get advice as to where these people have come from or where they might be expected to be found for many hours after we ask for it. Let's just focus on fixing it. But
So what happens to the 23 people who you found? Do they get booted
They-
out of Victoria now?
no. We have a conversation with them and we make sure that they know what the rules are, and it's a kind of a welfare check in many respects. Are you healthy? Do you know what the rules are? Here are all the rules, and then we go from that. We've got no power to be sending people home. It doesn't have to come to that. But to say that people were quite surprised that we found ourselves in this bubble, despite the fact we'd said we would not be, would be an understatement. That's happened now. Let's just make sure that things are better and there's perhaps a greater flow of information, and whether it's administrative or whatever, I'm not interested in a fight. It's not unreasonable though for us to say, look, if people are coming to our state, we'd like to know, when, we'd like to have a heads up about that, we'd like to have that in accordance with the question that was asked of us and the answer that we gave. And I think we'll get there.
Just to clarify Victoria's position on this, the press conference here on October 3rd, Professor Sutton was asked about the travel bubble and said, I don't know that we have missed out. New Zealanders are free to come to Victoria. The question is what the requirements are on arrival.
Exactly.
The travel bubble, as I understand, is that there is no quarantine requirement. Victoria is open. So can we just clarify how, if New Zealanders are free to come here, how has it got to
Well,
a
no,
point where...
but they're not free to come here.
Well,
That was a broad statement long before the bubble was settled and long before
the point where the bubble arrangement
hang on. That's long before I believe I can get you the exact date, but that's before, certainly before, whether it's long before or not, but it's before the Prime Minister wrote to me, and I'm not finding fault with the PM, but a comment was put to me by a federal minister, but the PM wrote to me, do you want to be part of this? And I said, yes, but not now. There'll be a time we want to be, of course we do. And hopefully we get the reciprocal arrangement and Australians can go to New Zealand. Although I'd be commending to all Victorians to stay in Victoria and spend up big in Victoria rather than going to New Zealand. This is fixable. I'm sure it will be. But until there's some acknowledgement, I think, that this is not ideal, it'll be hard to fix. But I'm confident we'll get this. We'll get this fixed.
This would happen when Professor Sutton was at the meetings on Monday and Tuesday where this issue was discussed.
Well, apparently it was discussed. I just remind you that the AHPPC, nobody voted for anyone at AHPPC. They provide advice. They're not politicians. They have no executive authority. And if that's now the standard, that national policy set by the fact that it was talked about at a meeting, that'll make things rather challenging, I think. Again, this has happened. These people are here. It's not about anything other than the fact that the first we knew of it was when they turned up. Then we started asking questions, and we said, well, look, give us their names. We'll get onto them and have a chat to them. That took a while, quite a while, and then it turned out that some of the information, and it's not, maybe it's not Border Force's fault. Maybe the person wrote the wrong thing on the card. I don't know, but we certainly, we asked for that on Friday night. We got it lunchtime Saturday, I think. In any event, we can't change what's happened. Point I'm making is that it's not unreasonable for all of us, all governments, at all levels, to have, and all agencies, just to have a clear picture on who's coming, so that we can engage.
You, considering that your version of the truth, I suppose, keeps changing.
I think I've just responded to the question about not being at a meeting where a specific issue was discussed, so I hope that's settled. In relation to the emails, I've probably had 30,000 emails on coronavirus since this has started. I get up to 150 a day. I'm in copy for many of them. Many of them run to several pages. If I've missed a reference to security in late May when the program was established, I'm sorry. It hasn't registered. So when I've spoken to the inquiry to say exactly that was the case. I was never involved in the decision making around private security. I didn't get asked my opinion on it. I wasn't involved in the setup of the program, and I didn't have a command or control role. And as I said to the inquiry at the time, my public health team were trying to make a case for stronger oversight from the public health team, so I was keen.
The Commonwealth Health Department has confirmed you were there throughout the whole meeting on Monday and also on Tuesday.
So I wasn't there the whole time on a Monday. I think that's been made clear.
Convenient that you weren't there for that.
How can it be convenient? I think I was here.
Inconvenient, I suppose.
I think I was here prior to that meeting. I think I was going to my office from here at the time that it started, so I couldn't get there on time.
I suppose it's just in the last 2 days we've seen emails that you were part of that included private security. That's been such a critical issue in the whole hotel quarantine program. Now, you said yesterday you weren't there at this other really important meeting. Now we're hearing that you were there. It's just a bit hard to follow.
I wasn't there because I was here. I go to those meetings whenever I can make it. If I've got other commitments, my Secretariat support is there to note. I get that information at the end of every meeting. I think Alan Cheng was there for the entire meeting on the Monday. So, Victoria has representation. My deputy was there.